All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are unpacking an explainer that fundamentally challenges our entire understanding of human history. Because all around the world, there are these incredible places where the stone itself seems to guard a secret, a question that literally nobody has completely managed to answer. And it's not that we're lacking theories, right? But when you really look closely, the standard explanations always seem to just stop, right one step short of the actual truth. I mean, who decided to erect blocks weighing tens, hundreds, and sometimes thousands of tons? Who organized the labor? Who picked the precise locations? And crucially, why would they do this in a world long before written history even existed? So when we face structures that are this ancient, this precise, and just this monumental, human nature tends to swing wildly between two pretty terrible extremes. The first temptation? Well, it's to just oversimplify everything. We write them off, we say, oh, ancient peoples were just primitive, they did what they could with rocks, and we move on without really looking at the evidence. But on the other hand, the other extreme is abandoning history altogether and diving straight into fantasy, claiming it must be aliens or some kind of impossible magic. The problem is, neither of these attitudes actually helps us understand what is standing right in front of us. So our goal today is to cut through the noise and find that fascinating, intellectually grounded middle ground. Section 1. A mystery engraved in stone. Okay, let's dive into this real context. The real mystery here doesn't just lie in the massive size of these stones. It actually lies in the timeline itself. Think back to that standard historical model we all learned in school. First, humanity was just small, scattered groups of hunter-gatherers trying to survive, right? Then, boom, they invent agriculture. Agriculture allows them to settle down, which eventually leads to building cities. And finally, once you have this complex society and a stable city, well, then you have the resources to build grand monuments. It's a very neat, linear story of progress. But modern archaeology is finding out that this picture is dangerously incomplete. Actually, scratch that neat timeline, because this concept from the Smithsonian completely shatters it. They're talking about Göbekli Tepe, located in modern-day Turkey. At this site, archaeologists have uncovered 16-foot-tall, 7 to 10-ton T-shaped pillars, and they are intricately decorated with carvings of foxes, scorpions, and vultures. But here's the truly shocking part. This was built in the 10th to 9th millennium BC by hunter-gatherers. People without known formal writing, without metal, without functional wheels for construction, somehow mobilized a massive collective labor force. The monument didn't come at the end of civilization. The collective effort to build the monument might have actually created the foundations of the civilization itself. Section 2. Monuments that defy history. Let's look at the global pattern. So Göbekli Tepe completely flips the script, but it is absolutely not an isolated exception. It is part of a profound global pattern spanning across completely different eras and completely different landscapes. Just taking a broad look at how widespread this is, we've got Göbekli Tepe defying the agricultural timeline. Then over in Spain, there's the Dolmen de Menga around 3800 BC, showing unbelievable integration with the landscape. Over in Lebanon, the ruins of Baalbek feature a pre-Roman block weighing a staggering 1,650 tons. And high up in the Andes at Sacsayhuaman, there's anti-seismic precision hinting at older pre-Inca foundations. It proves that even when written records existed, they didn't always capture the true origins of these monumental feats. 150 tons. Just let that single number sit in your mind for a second. This brings us specifically to the Dolmen de Menga in southern Spain, which is this monumental chamber made of just colossal stone blocks. Recent geoarchaeological studies indicate some of the roofing blocks approach 150 tons. But it is not just the weight that is staggering for a prehistoric society. They intentionally extracted these stones from an outcrop a full kilometer away, and they purposefully selected a relatively soft rock. This is a huge detail, because it proves they weren't just improvising on the fly. They had a deep, advanced understanding of material selection, logistics, and planning. And what's really fascinating here is the mental detail this site reveals. See, most European megalithic monuments face the sunrise. It's predictable, right? Menga, however, was intentionally oriented toward La Peña de los Enamorados, which is a natural mountain with a very distinct anthropomorphic, human-like shape. They even dug a deep well right inside the monument. Suddenly, this isn't just a tomb made of heavy rocks anymore. It's a carefully thought-out piece of sacred geometry. They literally transformed the surrounding landscape into an active part of their belief system. And doing that takes an incredibly sophisticated worldview. Moving forward in time, we land at Baalbek in Lebanon. And you guys, the numbers get even crazier. 1,650 tons. While most of the visible complex at Baalbek is associated with the Romans, centered around the massive Temple of Jupiter, around the ancient quarry, teams from the German Archaeological Institute found megalithic blocks prepared for transport that are just mind-boggling. We are talking about one block measuring roughly 19.6 by 6 by 5.5 meters, weighing an estimated 1,650 tons. It is arguably the single largest known ancient block ever prepared for moving. Then we travel to Sacsayhuaman, perched above Cuzco in Peru. Now, instead of a basic, simple, ancient stone wall, what do we see? Massive irregular blocks, interlocked with mortarless joints so incredibly precise, they look like they were literally molded together. This construction features zigzag walls that have an implicit anti-seismic logic built right into them. In fact, major earthquakes have rolled through and destroyed much newer colonial buildings in the region, while these ancient walls, they stood completely stable. Plus, archaeologists have found pre-Inca remains there, meaning the site has a much longer, layered history than just the 15th century. Section 3. The Limits of Classic Explanations. Okay, so let's recap. We have hunter-gatherers building monumental pillars, 150-ton blocks moved across valleys, 1,650-ton stones left in quarries, and earthquake-proof puzzle walls. You've probably heard the standard textbook script for how they pulled this off, right? They had abundant time, an endless massive workforce, ramps, ropes, wooden logs, sledges, and they just learned through trial and error. Now, to be fair, this isn't necessarily wrong. This explanation perfectly answers the basic physics question. Is it theoretically possible for humans to do this? Yes, for sure. But it completely glosses over the much deeper logistical, organizational, and philosophical mysteries at play here. And that brings us to the ultimate question we have to ask ourselves. But why make this choice? Why would a society choose to invest so much energy, take on such extreme logistical risks, and push the very limits of human endurance when far easier construction alternatives absolutely existed? If you just want to build a temple to Jupiter, you don't need a 1,650-ton base rock. If you just want a protective wall, you don't need interlocking mortarless puzzle pieces. The classic explanations tell us that they could do it, but they totally fail to tell us why they chose to do it this specific, incredibly difficult way. Section 4. 3 hypotheses on our past. Let's break down the possibilities. Since the classic explanations fall a bit short, we can really boil the realistic possibilities down to 3 distinct, intellectually rigorous hypotheses based on the archaeological framework. Step 1 is simply underestimated human capabilities. This fits Göbekli Tepe perfectly. Ancient people were just much more socially organized and technically capable than we give them credit for. Step 2 is successive layers. Places like Baalbek and Sacsayhuaman weren't built by just one people in one era. They're a long historical conversation where newer empires build directly on top of older, sacred foundations. And step 3 is lost regional cultures. This fits the Minga site. A highly organized society existed, completely mastered their landscape, and then vanished, leaving almost no narrative trace behind. And to really grasp these hypotheses, we have to understand a crucial concept: chronological humility. It's the recognition that highly useful knowledge, incredibly deep societal organization, and complex capabilities can absolutely exist without abundant written texts or modern machinery. Our current vision of the past isn't completely wrong, but it is deeply incomplete if we just assume that historical progress is always a straight line from primitive to advanced. Sometimes profound knowledge peaks and then it just fades away. Section 5. The enigma of the vanished builders. The fading echoes of the past. This brings us to what is arguably the most chilling piece of the whole puzzle. We are left looking at these massive stones, knowing for a fact that a highly capable intelligence put them there, but we're completely unable to hear their voices. Because at the end of the day, stone will survive better than written memory. These advanced regional societies didn't need to be some science fiction lost continent like Atlantis. They were simply brilliant, incredibly capable cultures whose oral traditions eventually collapsed. Maybe it was climate change, maybe a severe famine, maybe war. Whatever the exact cause, their social structures broke down, and their stories were lost to time. The only thing they left behind to speak for them was the one thing that couldn't be erased: the stone itself. So if early societies were capable of erecting works so durable, so precise, and so mathematically and philosophically complex, how could they disappear without a trace? How could they leave the future to reconstruct their entire legacy almost completely in the dark? That right there is the true gap in our historical models. And that is the enduring mystery that continues to challenge everything we think we know about the human story. Thanks so much for exploring this with us today, and as always, keep questioning.